Sador Jiho Kim stood at the window of his quarters, watching the eternal sunset of the orbital station. Today was his first day as Earth's representative to the Galactic Senate. After 30 years of space travel, humans had finally been admitted to the Grand Alliance of Stars, but nobody seemed happy about it. "Ambassador Kim, your transport departs in 20 minutes, said his assistant's voice over the intercom. Jiho straightened his formal blue uniform. At 60 years old, his dark hair showed streaks of silver, but his eyes remained sharp. Those eyes had witnessed Earth's greatest triumphs and darkest conflicts. Now they would witness humanity's first steps into galactic politics. The transport pod glided smoothly through the massive Senate complex. Alien delegates from dozens of worlds moved through the corridors. Many cast unfriendly glances at the human. "First time seeing a human?" Jiho asked a small, furry delegate who stared openly. "I've seen the reports," the creature replied. "Your kind achieved faster than light travel only 3 decades ago. The rest of us have been here for millennia. You're like children." Jiho smiled politely. "Children grow up fast." The Senate chamber took his breath away. Thousands of seats arranged, in rising tiers, with the speaking platform at the center. The dominant species, the insect-like Varrock, the scaled Noros, and the luminous Tamin, occupied the best positions near the floor. Smaller delegations were relegated to the upper tiers. Humans, being the newest arrival, had been assigned a tiny booth at the very top. "Not exactly prime real estate," Jiho muttered as he settled into his seat. The Senate President, a Varrock with gleaming black carapace, called the session to order. The agenda scrolled across Jiho's screen. Item 17 caught his attention. Emergency relief measures for the Outer Rim plague outbreak. For 4 hours, Jiho listened as delegates debated procedure, jurisdiction, and resource allocation. Meanwhile, according to the data, thousands were dying each day on the affected planets. The committee recommends maintaining standard distribution. "Protocols," announced a Varrock representative, mandibles clicking. "Aid will be allocated according to established civilizational development metrics." Jiho studied these metrics and felt a chill. The formula heavily favored developed core worlds, leaving the frontier planets, mostly populated by smaller, less powerful species, with minimal assistance. When the session ended, Jiho approached a Varrock diplomat. "Excuse me, the aid formula seems unbalanced. The frontier worlds will receive almost nothing." The Varrock's compound eyes swiveled toward him. "Evolutionary dead ends receive what they deserve. Focus on human concerns, Ambassador." "You've only just arrived." Back in his quarters, Jiho reviewed Earth's history of pandemic responses. From the Black Death to the great pandemics of the 21st century, humanity had learned hard lessons about the cost of slow action and unfair distribution. A soft chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. A small, blue-skinned aide entered. "Ambassador Kim, I'm Minho. I work with the Frontier Worlds Coalition." "What can I do for you, Minho?" The aide glanced nervously at the door before extracting a data chip. "You should see this. The major powers are deliberately slowing aid. They're forcing resource concessions from desperate planets in exchange for vaccines." Jiho examined the data. "This is classified." "Yes," Minho whispered. "My homeworld is among those affected. Please, can you help us?" Jiho stared at the evidence of exploitation. The Galactic Senate, supposedly the pinnacle of civilization, was using a plague to strengthen political control. "I'm requesting speaking time at tomorrow's session," Jiho decided. Minho's eyes widened. "They won't listen to a human." "Then I'll make them listen," Jiho said, feeling a fire building inside him. He may be new to the Senate, but humanity was not new to fighting against injustice. These bullies have never met a human diplomat before. They'll learn we don't back down easily. That night Jiho barely slept. The old saying echoed in his mind. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. Tomorrow, he would not do nothing. Jiho Kim walked through the grand hallways of the Galactic Senate. His hands gripped a tablet containing the evidence that Minho had given him last night. 3 days had passed since his first Senate session, and he still felt like an outsider. "Ambassador Kim," called a voice behind him. A tall Noros diplomat approached, scales gleaming under the artificial light. "I see you're settling in. How are you finding the Senate?" "Fascinating," Jiho said carefully, "though I wonder why the relief efforts for the plague are moving so slowly." The Noros diplomat's face hardened. Complex matters require careful consideration. Perhaps humans are too impulsive in their decision-making. Perhaps some are too calculating, Jiho replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The diplomat leaned closer. "A word of advice, Ambassador. You represent a young species with no allies. Know your place." As the Noros walked away, Jiho's resolve only strengthened. He spent the morning studying the Senate rules of procedure. If he was going to challenge the powerful members, he needed to understand their system perfectly. Later, Jiho sat in a small dining hall where the less important delegates gathered. He noticed representatives from various frontier worlds sitting alone or in small groups, not mixing with the delegates from more powerful planets. "May I join you?" he asked a group of 3 small green-skinned delegates. They looked surprised, but nodded. Jiho set down his tray and introduced himself. "We know who you are," said one. "The human, we didn't expect you to sit with us." "Why not?" Jiho asked. "The powerful species usually stick together," replied another. "They call us the little ones." "Behind our backs," Jiho nodded. "On Earth we have a saying, the tallest trees catch the most wind." "What does that mean?" asked the third delegate. "It means the powerful are also the most exposed," Jiho explained. "They believe themselves untouchable, which is their weakness." Over the meal, Jiho learned more about the frontier worlds. Their planets were rich in resources, but lacked the military and economic power of the core worlds. The plague was devastating their populations, yet aid was being deliberately delayed. "The Varak are demanding mining rights in exchange for vaccines," whispered a delegate from Telo, a small blue planet in the outer rim. "We'll save our people now, but be slaves for generations." Back. In his office, Jiho studied data about each major species in the Senate. The Varak responded to direct challenges. The Noros respected strength. The Tamin were sensitive to public opinion. His door chimed, and Minho entered with 2 other aides, all looking nervous. "Ambassador, have you looked at the evidence?" Minho asked. "Yes," Jiho said, "and I'm requesting speaking time at tomorrow's full session." The aides exchanged worried glances. "The major powers control the speaking list," said one. "They'll deny your request," Jiho smiled. "I found a rule that allows emergency motions on matters of life and death. They can't block me without openly admitting they don't care about the plague victims." That evening, Jiho received a message on his tablet. It was from the Noros diplomat he had met earlier. "Withdraw your request to speak or face consequences. Humans have no standing here." Jiho didn't reply. Instead, he recorded a message to his grandchildren on Earth. He showed them the view from his window, the vast expanse of stars that humanity was just beginning to explore. "I may not be welcomed back after tomorrow," he told them, "but sometimes we must stand up, even when we stand alone." He worked through the night, preparing his speech and gathering data. He organized evidence showing how the current aid distribution system would result in billions of deaths, while a more equitable approach could save nearly everyone. As morning approached, Jiho felt a calm determination. In his 60 years, he had faced down corporate giants and negotiated peace in war zones. The Galactic Senate might be larger, but the principles remained the same. Speak truth to power. Minho arrived early, dark circles under his eyes. "The speaking request was approved," he said, sounding amazed. "You have 5 minutes before the full Senate." Jiho nodded. 5 minutes is all I need." "The major powers are already working to undermine you," Minho warned. "They're telling everyone to ignore the human's emotional outburst." "Let them," Jiho said, standing tall in his formal blue uniform. "They're about to learn that humans don't back down from a challenge, especially when lives are at stake." Jiho sat alone in his quarters, surrounded by data screens. The blue light reflected off his tired face. 4 hours until his speech, and there was still so much to prepare. "Amber computer, show me the cultural profile of the Varak again," he said. The screen displayed information about the insect-like species that dominated the Senate. The Varak respected direct confrontation and clear evidence. They responded to strength, not appeals to emotion. Jiho made notes. His speech needed to be tailored for all three major powers. The Varak would get facts. The Noros would receive challenges to their honor. The Tamin would hear appeals to their sense of legacy. A soft chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called. Minho slipped inside, carrying a small device. "Ambassador, I've brought something that might help. It's a translation enhancer. It makes your words sound more natural to each species." "Thank you," Jiho said, taking the device. "How are the other frontier representatives responding to my speaking request?" "They're afraid," Minho admitted, "but many will support you privately. Some might even speak up if you make a strong case." Jiho nodded. "I need their voices. 1. Human alone can be dismissed, but a coalition cannot." After Minho left, Jiho stood before the mirror and practiced his delivery. He needed to appear confident but not aggressive, firm but not threatening. "The plague affects us all," he said to his reflection. "The strength of any civilization is measured by how it treats its most vulnerable members." His tablet chimed with a message, an invitation to dine with the Noros ambassador. Jiho recognized it for what it was, an attempt to intimidate him before his speech. He politely declined. A second message arrived minutes later. This one from Earth Command, Ambassador Kim. "We understand you plan to challenge Senate protocols tomorrow. We advise caution. Humanity's position is precarious. Do not jeopardize our standing." Jiho frowned. Earth Command didn't understand the full situation. They hadn't seen the evidence of exploitation. He recorded a brief reply. "I understand your concerns, but I cannot remain silent in the face of preventable suffering. This is why you sent me here." As the day progressed, Jiho received more messages, some supportive from frontier world representatives, others threatening from allies of the major powers. A particularly worrying message came from a Varak trade. "Minister, your speech will be cut short if you present any classified information. Such an action would constitute a violation of Senate security protocols." They were trying to block him from showing the evidence. Jiho needed a different approach. He called Minho again. "I need representatives from at least 5 affected worlds to meet me before the session. Can you arrange that?" "I'll try," Minho promised. Jiho then turned to his medical data. If he couldn't show the classified evidence directly, he would demonstrate the consequences of the current policy through public health projections. He worked with the computer to create visual models showing infection rates and death tolls under different aid distribution scenarios. The numbers were shocking. Millions of lives hung in the balance. 2 hours before the session, Minho returned with representatives from 7 frontier worlds. They gathered in Jiho's quarters, a collection of different species united by concern. "Thank her." "You for coming," Jiho said. "I need each of you to be ready to speak briefly about conditions on your planets." "They won't call on us," said a small, furry delegate. "They will if I yield my time to you," Jiho explained. "Senate rules allow it, and they cannot refuse without appearing to silence plague victims." The group practiced their short statements. Each would speak for only 30 seconds, but together they would create a powerful picture of suffering and resilience. 1 hour before the session, Jiho received a final message. This one from his doctor on Earth. "Test results confirmed. Treatment options attached. Please respond immediately to discuss." Jiho stared at the message. The diagnosis he had feared had been confirmed. A rare form of cancer, with limited treatment. Options. He had perhaps 1 year left. He closed the message without replying. This news changed nothing about today's task, but it freed him from fear of personal consequences. He changed into his formal diplomatic uniform and looked at himself. In the mirror, he saw not just a human ambassador, but a representative of all those who had ever fought against unjust systems. "Ready?" Minho asked from the doorway. Jiho nodded, picking up his tablet. "The Senate has existed for thousands of years, but they've never met a human diplomat before. Let's show them what that means." Together, they walked toward the Senate chamber, Jiho's steps firm and determined. He had nothing to lose, and billions had everything to gain. The great Senate chamber hummed with conversation as Jiho entered. Thousands of delegates from across the galaxy filled the tiered seats. Most ignored the human as he walked to the center platform. The Senate president, a tall Varrock with gleaming black carapace, tapped a glowing rod against his podium. The sound echoed through the chamber, and the noise slowly died down. The Senate recognizes Ambassador Jiho Kim of Earth, the president announced, his voice flat. You have 5 minutes to address the emergency plague relief measures. Jiho stood straight as he faced the assembly. He could feel the dismissive stares of the major powers on the lower tiers. The Noros delegation didn't even bother to look up from their screens. Distinguished representatives of the galaxy, Jiho began, his voice stronger than many expected. I stand before you not only as Earth's ambassador, but as a voice for those who have none. He touched his tablet, and a large holographic display appeared above him. It showed a map of the galaxy with red dots representing plague outbreaks. This plague has spread to 17 systems in the Outer Rim, he continued. Under the current aid distribution model, 14 of these systems will receive less than 20% of the vaccines they need. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Jiho noticed some of the smaller delegations leaning forward. Humanity may be young among the stars, he said. We achieved faster-than-light travel only 30 years ago, but we bring 5,000 years of diplomatic history with us. The display changed to show images from Earth's history, ancient plagues, modern pandemics, and the global responses to each. We have learned hard lessons about disease and response. When our ancestors distributed aid based on wealth or power, millions died needlessly. When they shared resources equitably, they saved billions. A Varrock senator stood up. The human uses emotional appeals instead of respecting our established protocols. This is not how the Senate operates. I speak of data, not emotions, Jiho replied calmly. He touched his tablet again. The display showed 2 models side by side. On the left is the current distribution model. It results in 3.7 billion deaths. On the right is an equitable model. It results in 200 million deaths. Both use exactly the same resources, just distributed differently. The chamber grew quieter. Even some of the major powers were watching now. But there is something else you should know, Jiho continued. Something that explains why certain powers insist on the current model. A warning light flashed on Jiho's podium. The Senate president leaned forward. Be careful, Ambassador. Classified information cannot be shared in this forum. Jiho nodded. I understand. So instead I will yield 1 minute of my time to Representative Minho of Teralis, whose planet is currently suffering from the plague. Before anyone could object, Minho stepped forward. His blue skin looked pale under the chamber lights. 2 days ago, my world received a private offer from a Varrock trade consortium, Minho said, his voice shaking slightly. They promised immediate vaccines in exchange for exclusive mining rights to our moon for the next 50 years. Gasps and shouts erupted from various parts of the chamber. The Varrock delegation buzzed with angry clicking sounds. Jiho reclaimed the platform. 5 other frontier worlds have received similar offers. This is not aid. It is extortion of the desperate. The Senate president banged his rod. Your time is nearly expired, Ambassador. Then I will be brief, Jiho said. He looked up at the highest tiers where the smaller delegations sat. The foundation of any civilized society is how it treats its most vulnerable members. A system that sacrifices billions to benefit the powerful few is not civilization. It is predation. He turned to face the major powers directly. Humanity has committed terrible atrocities in our history. We have exploited the weak. We have watched suffering with indifference. And we have learned through painful experience that such behavior destroys not only the victims, but eventually the perpetrators as well. The warning light on his podium turned red. His time was up. I propose an emergency vote on a new aid distribution model, Jiho said quickly. One based on need, not power. One worthy of the great civilization this Senate claims to represent. He stepped back from the platform as the chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted at each other. The Varrock president banged his rod repeatedly, trying to restore order. Jiho walked back to his seat, his heart pounding. He had done what he could. Now it was up to the Senate to decide what kind of civilization they truly wanted to be. From the upper tiers, The representatives of the frontier worlds stood up one by one. They began a slow, rhythmic tapping on their podiums. The sound spread across the chamber, growing louder as more delegates joined in. A Tamin counselor, her luminous form glowing brightly, floated to the center platform. "I call for an immediate vote on Ambassador Kim's proposal," she announced. The Senate President looked around the chamber, his compound eyes taking in the growing support. For the first time in centuries, the balance of power in the Galactic Senate had shifted. 6 hours after Jiho's speech, the Senate chamber remained in session. The vote tally appeared on the giant display screen, updating in real time as delegates registered their decisions. For the first time in Galactic Senate history, the smaller worlds were voting as a unified bloc. Jiho watched from his seat, exhausted but alert. The Varak delegation huddled in urgent conversation. Their leader kept glancing at the numbers with obvious alarm. "They never expected this," Minho whispered, sitting beside Jiho. "The major powers have always controlled the votes through alliances and pressure." "They forgot that desperate people are willing to take risks," Jiho replied. "The frontier worlds have nothing more to lose." The final votes came in from the Outer Rim delegations. The tally flashed green. The motion had passed by a slim margin of 23 votes. A moment of stunned silence fell over the chamber, followed by an eruption of sounds, cheers from the upper tiers, angry buzzing from the Varak, and hissing. From the Noros, the Senate President stood, mandibles clicking in agitation. "The emergency aid redistribution motion has passed. Implementation will begin immediately." As Jiho left the chamber, delegates from dozens of worlds approached him. Some offered thanks. Others simply wanted to touch the human who had challenged the established order. A tall Noros diplomat blocked his path. It was the same one who had threatened him earlier. "You've made powerful enemies today, human," the Noros said quietly. "Your species will pay for this interference." Jiho met the diplomats, gazed calmly. "We survived our own worst impulses for thousands of years. I think we'll manage." Back in his quarters, Jiho finally allowed himself to collapse into a chair. His tablet lit up with messages. Congratulations from Frontier Worlds, a confused inquiry from Earth Command, and a terse note from his doctor asking when he would begin treatment. "Computer, record a message to my grandchildren on Earth," Jiho said. The computer beeped in acknowledgement. "Mina, Tay, and little Jun," he began, smiling at the thought of their faces. "Today I learned that courage is contagious. One person standing up can inspire others to find their own strength. Remember that when you face difficult choices in your lives." He paused, considering whether to tell them about his diagnosis. Not yet, he decided. That news could wait. 2 months later, Jiho stood at the window of a medical ship orbiting Taralis, Minho's homeworld. Below, medical teams from 20 planets, including Earth, distributed vaccines and treatments. The plague's spread had been halted in 13 systems already. "The latest report, Ambassador," said a young Earth doctor, handing him a tablet. "Death rates have dropped by 70% since the new distribution began." Jiho nodded. "And the political situation?" "Mixed," the doctor admitted. "The Varak have recalled their ambassadors from 3 human colonies in protest, but the Tamin have proposed a formal alliance with Earth." Jiho wasn't surprised. The balance of power in the Senate had shifted permanently. The smaller worlds now understood their collective strength, and the major powers were adjusting to this new reality. His own condition had worsened faster than expected. The treatments were buying him time, but less than his doctors had hoped. Minho entered the room, his blue skin now healthy and vibrant. "Ambassador, your shuttle is ready. The Senate reconvenes tomorrow." "I won't be attending," Jiho said quietly. Minho looked confused. "But the restructuring committee needs your input on the new aid protocols." "I'm returning to Earth," Jiho explained. "My replacement, Ambassador Sora, arrives next week. She's younger, with fresh perspectives. The Senate will benefit from that." "But you changed everything," Minho protested. "The people call it the Kim Doctrine now, the principle that a civilization must be judged by how it treats its most vulnerable members." Jiho smiled. "Doctrines outlive their creators, as they should." 1 year later, A solemn gathering filled the central plaza of the Senate complex. Representatives from nearly every world in the galaxy stood in concentric circles around a simple monument. The new Senate President, a Taemin whose glow pulsed with gentle blue light, floated forward. "Today we honor Ambassador Jiho Kim of Earth, who left us 1 year ago," she announced. "His courage transformed our understanding of what this Senate could be." She touched the monument, and it illuminated, revealing a holographic image of Jiho, along with words in multiple languages. "The Kim Doctrine is now taught to all diplomatic cadets," she continued, "that the measure of any civilization lies not in its power, but in how it treats its most vulnerable members." From Earth's delegation, a young woman stepped forward. "Ambassador." Zora placed a small stone from Earth at the base of the monument. "My grandfather believed that change was always possible," she said, "even in systems that had remained static for thousands of years." As the ceremony concluded, a group of children from the frontier worlds released small glowing lanterns that drifted upward, illuminating the darkness like new stars being born. In the years that followed, humans became known throughout the galaxy, not for their military strength or technological advances, but for their persistent advocacy of the Kim Doctrine. It became their unique contribution to a civilization far older than their own, a reminder that even the newest voice could speak. Ancient truths, the